So for those who don't know me, my name is Chiquita Hessels. I'm one of the co-leads of the education and training theme here at ACCESS. I'm also a person with lived experience, and through the presentation, you'll hear it PWLE reference. So that is just the acronym of that. I have a condition called Lee-Fraumeni syndrome, and it affects children as well as, right up to any age, I guess. So this is one of the reasons I got myself involved with ACCESS. So ACCESS is a pan-Canadian pediatric network advancing childhood cancer experience, science, and survivorship. Our network of researchers, healthcare providers, partners, persons with lived experience is united by a shared commitment to equitable access to research, innovation, and care for children with cancer and their families in Canada. One of the ways we support these objectives is by hosting free educational sessions throughout the year. These sessions are designed to share updates and insights from a variety of experts in the pediatric cancer space. Today, we're excited to have you join us for our session, ACCESS Presents Childhood Cancer Advocacy and Survivorships, a PWLE perspective. So September, many of you know, is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So it's a time to honor the strength of patients, survivors, and families affected by cancer. And many of us on the call are affected this way. Cancer is the leading cause of disease-related death in children and adolescents beyond the newborn period. In Canada, approximately 10,000 children are currently living with cancer, and about 1,500 new cases are diagnosed each year. Drawing on experience, this session will explore the challenges of childhood cancer survivorship through a family's journey, from the physical and psychological struggles, the complexities of navigating the medical system. Joy, do you want to advance the next slide? We'd like to do, of course, our land acknowledgement. ACCESS respectfully recognizes and acknowledges the relationship of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada have with the land all Canadians live on and cherish. As we work to create, implement, and continue this pan-Canadian network, we would like to consider each of the 634 different First Nations communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements who have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. ACCESS is committed to working to build relationships that include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. So our speaker today, well, we'll carry on. So you'll see at the bottom, we have our chat box. So put your questions in the Q&A button. You can, I see there's a question here. Okay. Pardon me, just looking at the chat box here. So just put your questions in the Q&A button and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. So state your name and region you're joining from. And if you wish to remain anonymous, please indicate so. And if at the end of the session there aren't time to get through all of the questions, certainly Joy will answer your questions via ACCESS through email. So Joy is our speaker today. I'm happy to introduce her. She is one of our past co-chairs of our Theme 5 Education and Training, and she's gone off to further her education. So she is a person with lived experience, and she will share her insights on becoming an active advocate for pediatric cancer research and care, the importance of partnership with healthcare providers, and the unique challenges faced by survivors and their families. So I'm going to turn this over to Joy, and welcome again. Enjoy the workshop.
Thank you so much, Chiquita. So as you heard, and as you can see, my name is Joy Gandel, and I'm a PWLE. I am a mom, not only of a pediatric cancer survivor who is now 18 years old, my daughter. I am also a mom of our 20-year-old son. I'm a wife of 24 years. And before my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, I was in the human resource space for 20 years. And ever since she's ended treatment, I've been on a journey of a career transition that started with life coaching and is now going to start culminating in becoming a psychotherapist starting next fall. So I bring a lot of life experience and my HR background and some work in the mental health space with me today. I also want to acknowledge the fact that what you're going to hear today is just my story. For those other PWLEs on this webinar today, you all have your individual journeys, and my story in no way is trying to represent everybody's story. This is just my story, our story, my family's, my daughter's, that I wanted to share with all of you today in this very important month. So before I jump into our actual story, I wanted to share these quotes from the World Health Organization website that I found and I thought were very appropriate for today's webinar. So stories are at the heart of the human existence, and people are hardwired to respond to them. Stories provide meaning to facts and allow individuals to connect with the information being conveyed, both intellectually and emotionally. Evidence from neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral science show that storytelling has the power to change how people think and to influence their behavior. They go on to say that while each story has a different topic and objective, they share a common aim of humanizing complex health issues. By drawing on the emotional and relatable power of storytelling, these stories seek to change viewers' health knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. They draw the audience into the protagonist's experience, creating emotional engagement that health facts alone cannot achieve. And so that is my purpose here today, is in sharing our story, also sharing how advocacy has made an impact in our lives and hopefully will make an impact in your lives. So just to advise you all, my daughter has given permission for these pictures and her name to be shared with all of you. In December 2016, we got the news that our daughter, my husband and I, was diagnosed with metastatic Ewing sarcoma. At that time, she was 9 years old and she turned 10 during treatment. So treatment for her was a 10-month process. It started in December 2016 and ended in August 2017. She endured in those 10 months 34 weeks of 5 different chemotherapies. Some of you might recognize vincristine, doxorubicin, cyclophosphamide, ifosfamide, etoposide, as well as a plethora of other medications to counter the effects of these meds. When she was diagnosed and when we started the treatment journey, we were given 5 full pages of side effects. And what you have here, what you see here with these numbers, these are the different side effects. On many of the pages, all of the side effects were repeated. So there were 13 likely side effects, 54 less likely side effects, and 25 rare but serious side effects. So as we're being told about the Ewing sarcoma, we're also being handed these 5 sheets of paper with all of the side effects that we now have to absorb with the impending treatment that's about to start. And as we were told in that meeting, we're not concerned over the side effects. What we are concerned about is saving your daughter's life right now. In February of 2017, she endured her rib resection surgery. And they did their best to spare her breast tissue, anticipating what would happen in the future. And in that surgery, she lost 3 ribs. And then after that surgery, that was when the decision was made that she would also require radiation. And so over a period of 6 weeks, she endured 18 rounds of radiation. Throughout all these months, her anxiety steadily grew. And at one point, she was unable to be left alone, even to go to the bathroom on her own. And that's when I started looking for psychologists. She had already rejected the 2 hospital psychologists that were available to her and refused to speak to them. But I couldn't allow my daughter to not even go to the bathroom alone. And the only other option for her that the doctors gave was Ativan. And I had a real issue at that time giving Ativan to a 9-year-old child. And so my search began for a psychologist who would help her. And I called psychologist after psychologist only to be told that we can't help her because her anxiety is real. We only deal with the what if anxiety. And because her anxiety is real and it's serious, they were too afraid to work with my daughter. Finally, we met a psychologist who literally changed her experience during treatment. She suddenly was able to go to the bathroom alone and be left alone. Her anxiety dropped. She still had anxiety, but it was manageable. And she continued with that psychologist through the rest of treatment. A few weeks after the radiation ended, on the night of my son's grade 6 graduation, my daughter started struggling to breathe. And earlier that day, I had already noticed the struggles, and I took her to the day clinic, the pediatric oncology day clinic. And they checked her and they said that she was okay and to bring her back if things worsened. Something in me woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go check on her, and her breathing had significantly deteriorated to the point where we rushed her to the emergency room. And it took about a week of her finally ending up on oxygen to realize that she had severe radiation pneumonitis, a severity of which they had not yet seen in children in North America, as her respirologist was desperate to find what would help her. And as we figured out treatment to eventually get her off oxygen for the radiation pneumonitis, we ended treatment with her off oxygen at the end of August of 2017, and we were looking forward to a bright future, even though I was about to find out that she only had a 20% chance of survival beyond 5 years. Because during this time, a good friend and also doctor at the Montreal Children's Hospital told me not to do research in her cancer. I guess she knew the reality that I was about to find out was that her prognosis was not good. And so she just told me to focus on now and getting through treatments. So this is what my daughter looks like today. although this picture was taken 2 years ago. Her name is Talia, and this was at her high school graduation. So after treatment ended, she was then diagnosed because she got sick and was really having a hard time overcoming the cold. She was then diagnosed with acute bronchiectasis. So at this point, the radiation pneumonitis and the rib resection, where they had to remove the bottom right lobe of her lung, caused a situation where the right, if some of you know about lung tissue, it's alveoli, they would open but not close. And so they would stay open, which made it easier for her to have infections in her lungs. And so then we started with respiratory follow-ups every 6 months for the first 5 years, and they've been annual since. While her lung capacity has fluctuated, today her lung capacity is stable at around 45%. And during COVID, when we didn't know how it would impact all of us, she was forced to stay home from school for an entire year because the respirologists at the Montreal Children's Hospital determined that the cutoff for safety would be 60%. So any of their patients, regardless of diagnosis, if their lung capacity was above 60%, they could go to school. Below 60%, they had to stay home. So my daughter stayed home the entire year, learning online while all of her friends were at school. So this is now year 2 of her missing a full academic year of social interaction with her friends. We also experienced 2 relapse scares and the biopsies that go with it. In 2021, during that year that she was at home for COVID, we discovered that she had a tremendous number of gallstones as a result of the treatments that she received. And prophylactically, because they didn't want her to have an emergency gallbladder removal, we opted for a gallbladder removal. So in March of 2021, she had laparoscopic gallbladder surgery. As she hit puberty and she started developing, her chest became pronounced deformed. Where the ribs used to be on the right side, she now had a huge concave hole. And what we noticed is her right breast never grew. Her left breast grew a little bit. So now, going through adolescence, when all of her friends are on Instagram and trying to copy the latest trends, she has a physical deformity that is leaving her pretty uncomfortable. We quickly go and get a breast prosthetic, and this is how she gets through the next few years. She lives with a breast prosthetic under her bra, or inside her bra rather, to make her look somewhat even. You can imagine that shopping becomes a nightmare. Something that all teenage girls and boys love to do is go to the mall, hang out, and shop becomes an absolute nightmare for my daughter. The prom dress that you see in front of you is not one that was easily bought off a rack in a store. We had this custom made because I made her a promise that she would go to prom looking like everybody else. A year later, she's diagnosed again because she's missing ribs. Her spine is now curving because our ribs provide structure to our ability to stand upright. And she is fitted for a back brace for scoliosis. And she wears that back brace for a full year and undergoes physiotherapy to hopefully correct for the spine curvature. And we find out 1 year later that it didn't work and would require spinal fusion surgery. So at the end of the summer of 2022, she had spinal fusion surgery and missed another 6 weeks of her grade 10 year of high school. She was also told that she could not really do any sports. She couldn't do anything more than walk for at least 6 months to a year after that surgery. This was when she told, so I would say about 2 years ago, when she graduated from high school, she told an osteopath that she was seeing while I was in the room that the last time she remembered being truly happy was before her spinal fusion surgery. This, and even before that, prompted a search for a mental health therapist to help her because I saw her struggling. I saw her struggling in school. I saw her struggling not being able to do the things that she wanted to do and to be like her friends. And we went through several. I can't tell you how many people I called who refused to treat her, who had a trauma expertise because she was too young. She did end up seeing 3 mental health therapists, and all 3 went nowhere. It's only this latest one that she's been seeing for almost a year now, who has specific trauma experience, works with children to adults, that has finally stuck. And we're finally seeing movement. Even she's saying things are getting better. So while I was told not to do any research during treatment, I launched myself into research post-treatment. And the research is what really helped me start to fight for her to ensure that she got the right therapy, that she got the right physiological care that she needed, and basically a lot of time waiting and fighting for surgery, advocating for her, saying, come on, even with all the other kids who need spinal fusion surgery, how many of them have already gone through 10 months of treatment, have already done this, and in hopes to get her to jump the line to have surgery during the summer to avoid her missing more school. In her grade 11 year is when we decided that we needed to do something about her chest deformity. And one thing led to another, and we met with a breast oncologist because I had done research and I had 6 studies that indicated that the doxorubicin she received along with the radiation put her at almost the same risk of breast cancer as those with the BRCA gene. And I figured once we're going in to give her implants and to do all this work, let's just do a bilateral mastectomy, easy for me to say at my age. Let's just do a bilateral mastectomy to get breast cancer off the table of things that we have to worry about in her future. The doctor at the time didn't think anything of it, and he was a great surgeon, and he trusted that I had done my research and sent us to the radiation oncologist to back up what I said. She agreed, and we started down that process. Part of the breast oncologist and the plastic surgeon's decision was that her whole chest wall needed to be reconstructed. And so they sent us to a thoracic surgeon. And the thoracic surgeon had to do more research to find something suitable in Canada to put inside her body that would be stable enough to hold up a breast, an implant. And there was nothing available in Canada. It was only available in Europe and the United States. So together, he and I fought very hard to get a German company to send us prosthetics here in Canada for Health Canada to approve them on an emergency basis and for the government to pay for it to avoid us having to go to the United States for the surgery. She had her first rib prosthetic surgery in January of 2025. Yes, a little over 6 months ago. And then the plastic surgeon looked at her again and said, we need more prosthetic ribs. So we had to go through that entire process all over again with Health Canada approval and got it done even faster this time. And her second rib prosthetic surgery happened this July. The plan is to give her a year to recover, or a little less than a year to recover. We are now looking at a bilateral mastectomy, breast implants, and harvesting of her eggs for June of 26. And our hope is that this is the final surgery so that she can have a break for a little bit of time before she has to worry about more health complications from all the other treatments she's received. Today, she's 18 years old, and we are now 8 years post-treatment. So as I reflect on our experience and I think about the time between December 2016 and August 2017, I think about the intensity of the treatments, of how we were just living literally day by day, minute by minute, not knowing what was going to happen the next day because there were always surprises the next day. I could never plan our days. I think about the toll psychologically and physiologically this took on that little person's body. She was 8, 9, 10 years old at the time. And how much we were counting down to the end. We had a calendar and we literally marked off each day until we would return to what we thought was our everyday normal life. And then what ended up happening from September 2017 onwards till this day is not only were we beyond ecstatic that last day of treatment, but then we were filled with fear. The chemotherapy, the radiation, the surgery, those were our security blankets that kept the cancer at bay. Now we're going without, and we don't know when the cancer is going to come back. Her relapse chance are extremely high. And the fact that she only has a 20% chance of survival beyond the 5 years indicates that relapsed metastatic Ewing sarcoma, there are very little options. Most cancer patients pass away. The fear gripped us. It impacted Talia physiologically and psychologically, and all of her challenges, my challenges going through this psychologically and burning out, needing to see therapists myself, trying to find the appropriate individuals who would understand. And then the operational challenges, the constant hospital visits, constantly needing to be on top of how much more school can this person miss? I need to make sure all the appointments happen in one day, and it being up to me to coordinate all these appointments because there is no central nurse who's managing everything for us now that we've finished treatment. And the big question is, how do you manage your energy through the long term of survivorship? This is all emotionally and physically taxing. And with that goes our energy. And yet we have to maintain it for the long term. So how do we do that? And does this ever end? So whereas I'm saying we hope that June 26 brings the end of her immediate, we know that she still needs heart echographs every year to 2 years to check for her heart failure, to make sure she doesn't enter heart failure. There's a host of other things that she needs to be checked for in the long term. And the one constant that has been with us since the beginning, since December 2016, is advocacy. And so when I look at the Cambridge Dictionary for a definition of being an advocate, this is what I found. An advocate is someone who publicly supports or suggests an idea, development, or way of doing something, speaks for, supports, or represents a person or group of people who may need extra help or protection, and speaks for or defends someone in a court of law. So right now, I'm most concerned about the first two bullet points. And so I'm going to share with you my journey through advocacy. And it all started with her first biopsy. We were in the hospital after a day of scans and running around from department to department, and she was exhausted, and we're at the final stage, and they need to do a blood test. And I had put EMLA on her. A friend of mine had recommended EMLA. She was EMLA'd up, and the nurse goes to draw her blood. And all I hear the nurse saying is, "I'm in, but no blood is coming out." And I remember thinking, well, a vampire didn't suck her blood, so you cannot be in. And she's moving the needle in Talia's arm. And Talia, I see tears coming down her face, and I'm starting to feel very uncomfortable with what's happening. And thankfully, we had a child life service person with us, and I pulled her aside and I said, "Please have this stop. Something needs to be done." And once the nurse took the needle out, I said, "We're going to take a break." And I turned to the child life specialist and I said, "You need to get someone else to do this. I don't want that nurse approaching my daughter again." And she did. And that was the first time I realized that I can have an impact on how my daughter is treated in the hospital. Going forward, every time she had a needle, she then panicked because of that first experience. And so I made sure that everybody knew that she's considered a hard poke, and to get someone with a lot of experience drawing blood from very tiny veins. We also learned that blood transfusions were something difficult for her, as she would vomit every time she saw the bags of blood. So, as much as possible, when she was admitted to the hospital, all of her blood transfusions would happen in the middle of the night, covered with a sheet. So it looked like there was a ghost in the room, but at least it avoided more vomiting. And then that fateful day that I asked for a second opinion, and her doctor got extremely offended at the idea that I wanted a second opinion. And I had to soothe that doctor and make everything okay while still getting my way. Those were the first steps of being an advocate. Eventually, I got bolder and I did research. So during treatment, the research I was doing is, how can I avoid blood transfusions? How can we avoid platelet transfusions? And finding all of these natural ways to do it. Whether they worked or not didn't matter. I felt like I was doing something. And then proposing the ideas to doctors. So Dr. Capel, it was her respirologist while she was still at the Children's. And when she had that radiation pneumonitis, every time she'd come off cortisone, she would end up in difficulty breathing. And so I said to her, I said, "Why can't we keep her on high dose cortisone?" And the doctor said, "Well, for these reasons." I said, "I'm willing to chance it. I don't want her to have severe lung damage. I don't want her to end up on oxygen. Let's together try to figure this out." And she was game. And we worked together as partners to go places where other doctors may not have gone. And then a few years later, when I said, "What do you think about this chest issue that every time she takes a deep breath, when we take a deep breath, everything expands. But for her, her skin would get sucked into that hole." And so together we reached out to her surgeon and we were all experimenting. And it was that these doctors were listening to me and we were working together was really very encouraging and empowering for me. Post-treatment is when I really started to find my voice. That's when I really started doing research in metastatic Ewing's. I started doing research in whatever would come up that she needed to tackle. Along that time, I was also going through burnout and I was very frustrated with what I was experiencing, and I needed to find meaning and purpose in my life. And it was in those moments that I decided that human resources was no longer for me. I didn't feel any meaning or purpose. And so one of the ways that I was able to start feeling like I had something to get up for the next day, especially within that first year post treatment, was to do something and to talk about pediatric cancer to people who knew nothing about it. Because before pediatric cancer hit our lives, I had known nothing about it either. And so I started figuring out with hits and misses what I wanted to do. I also realized that I wanted to do something in line with pediatric cancer community. I wanted to do something in line with learning disabilities, as my daughter had those as well. And so one of the first myths was an email campaign. I reached out to the CEOs of McDonald's, M&M's, all of the big names that had something to do with kids. I had this vision of turning September into October for breast cancer awareness, where we now see pink on yogurt, everything. I wanted gold everywhere. And so I had these ideas of turning the Happy Meal and turning the arches into the gold ribbon and having M&Ms only gold in September. And so I did this email campaign, but I didn't really know what I was doing, so it fell flat. And then one day, I think it was in April of 2018, I read a newspaper article about this girl. Her name is Helena Kirk, and she is a leukemia survivor, and she's advocating the federal government on behalf of all pediatric cancer survivors. And so I find the Facebook group and I do everything they say to do. I meet with my MP, I tell the story, and it's through Helena's hope and through the moms of that group that I found not only my voice, I found connection and community. I found moms who were almost exactly like me, who helped me not feel so alone in this world, because it is a very lonely place when all of your friends don't know what it's like to live with a pediatric cancer survivor. I am so blessed to have amazing family and friends supporting us, and yet there's still that loneliness of no one truly understanding our experience. And that's what I felt with the moms of Helena's Hope. We formed a group. We were more than just advocates. We were each other's lifelines. At least that's what they felt like for me. And then I learned to work to my strengths. I'm not good at selling. That is not my strength. I am very good at speaking. I have years of experience at public speaking. I am very good at writing. And that's when I decided I'm going to only focus on what I'm good at. And that's when the $30 million came through and ACCESS was created. It wasn't called ACCESS from the beginning, but it was, and I was involved in the Matrix 5 education and training proposal. I then became involved with the Matrix 5 education and training. And as Shakita said, I was one of the earlier co-leads. And then I decided to go back to school. And so my education for my career transition is ongoing. And so unfortunately, I couldn't be a co-lead anymore. And my time, especially with all of the medical situation on my daughter, I don't have the time I used to. But what I am doing is doing talks like this where I could speak to all of you and share our story. I can speak to other doctors. I could join all of the ACCESS looking for participants and join as many focus groups as I can to share our story. And I also work hard at proposing and partnering with doctors. I shared before earlier that I spoke to our surgeon, showed the 6 studies on why it would be important to do a bilateral mastectomy, even though he never heard of it. And he trusted me enough to at least follow through and speak to a radiation oncologist to see if that was a good idea. And her thoracic surgeon, my best partner to date, Dr. Coles-Lartigue here in Montreal on the adult side. We have worked together for over a year now to get those ribs into Canada. He has helped us in incredible ways to get things done on a schedule that avoids her missing out on school and a social life as little as possible, because she, with all these surgeries, she's missing out on camp with her friends. She's already missed a semester in Quebec. We have CEGEP, so she's already missed a semester of CEGEP because of the surgeries, and he keeps trying to do his best to advocate again with her other doctors to help her medical process go smoother. And he listens to me. How many doctors give you their phone numbers? We text each other, and I don't take advantage. I try my best, but it feels so good to have someone listen and take you seriously from a medical perspective. I'm not saying her oncologist never did. They did. It's just this takes it to a whole other level. So as I reflect on my advocacy journey, I really think, and this is where I'm going to bring my HR hat on a little bit, on my mother's story. So at 18 months for myself, I was diagnosed with asthma, and I had very severe asthma as a child, and I was in the hospital a lot. And what I would see and watch is my mother advocating for me in the hospital setting. And she would show me that it would be okay to stand up to doctors and say, no, she's okay. You have to trust me. I know her pattern. She doesn't need to be admitted this time, or when I would need to be admitted. And then later on, as I got older and I hit my late teens, early 20s, my father got very ill. And I then saw her advocate for him and be his caregiver. And so with my HR hat, I think about succession planning. And so everything we do as advocates, as parents, advocating for our children, they are watching what we are doing, and they are watching role models in real time advocate not only for them, but for pediatric cancer in Canada. And hopefully they will learn through osmosis to become the next generation of advocates in this space. I also know that it's so important to start small. I didn't just jump into ACCESS. I started with just advocating on the needles, just opening my mouth to say when to cut a nurse from attempting to draw blood. I also learned that the power of our story, how just sharing our story really moves people. Sharing our story has helped us get Health Canada approval faster than I've been told it's ever happened before. And when my daughter finished treatment, I was working closely with an Indigenous community here in Montreal, and one of my contacts and I became very close. And when I was telling her that I was no longer going to continue in the HR space and wouldn't be continuing on their mandate, she shared with me the importance of their elders and the wisdom. And she wanted me to know, she made it very pointed. She said, what I've learned early on gives me wisdom. And so whereas the doctors have a ton of medical knowledge, critical medical knowledge that we need, we cannot underestimate how much wisdom we have gained going through this process. And that wisdom is worth gold. No pun intended. For those of you who don't know, gold is for pediatric cancer. I also learned to reflect on what my strengths and my expertise on and how I could use that to benefit this space. And I also want to share with you that I recognize the power imbalance, that doctors have and hold a lot of power over us. We feel intimidated. Nurses, we are in a very vulnerable position. And so to find whatever ways you have in communicating to smooth the waters, the ruffled feathers when advocating, and still advocate. And for any doctors or medical students on this webinar right now, my message to you would be, I know that 20 years ago, there was a class called Introduction to the Patient for many of you. I would go so far as to say, learn active listening skills like therapists do. I would go to say that when you are met with a caregiver or a patient who is advocating for themselves, do not take it as an affront to your expertise. They know themselves better than you know them. You know your knowledge better than they do. Together, you can form an incredible partnership to really enhance the care that they receive. And so instead of it being us versus them, how might we come together to be the best partners in this space? And one of the things that I'm going to end is that I recognize that I have a ton of privilege. I'm a white, educated woman. And I have a husband who is supporting me as I go and get other education and didn't have to work through my burnout. And so all of that comes with a lot of privilege. And I recognize that this is not the reality for the majority of people going through in our situation. And so I want to make sure that we do what we can to create an advocacy space that is welcoming for everybody, because we need everybody's stories. My story is not enough to speak for all pediatric cancer patients. We need everybody's stories to stand up and speak for all of us. So I'm going to skip this and go straight to here because I really am sorry. I've gone over time a little bit, and I will let whoever needs to come online come. I think it's Dawn.
Actually, I'll take the
Okay.
next
Sorry,
step.
Helen.
Thank you yeah, no problem, Joy. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. Thank you for sharing your story today and for all of the advocacy at all levels. Truly, truly fantastic. We do have time for a small number of questions. So if anybody has a question for Joy that you want to type into the Q&A, please do so now. Don't see any yet, but we'll wait for folks to include any. You have another thank you for your courage and vulnerability, and I do second that. Oh, here is one. How do you find these groups of moms and therapists specialized in pediatric cancer?
So I was lucky. I happened to read reading the news, and that's how I found Helena Kirk. But I think Access is a great resource now that we have it. So in my previous slide, there's now a website. It's called Stronger Than Cancer, and it groups everything. And if you join in your area, the either the advocacy group or the fundraising group, again, whatever goes with your expertise, you can get involved. Access is constantly looking, to the last of my knowledge, for people, and you meet people. And if you form a connection with someone, keep it, exchange your contact information. And so I think now more than ever in Canada, we're finally centralizing things and making it actually easier to find each other. And so I'd encourage everybody to go to strongerthancancer.ca would be a great place to start, because I've been noticing that there's a lot of centralization of knowledge where it makes it easier. But I kind of fell into it by reading a newspaper article. I was so lucky to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. And somebody did also mention that we should use parents and not just mothers, which is very important because a good and in a sense follow-up question to this is, what about supports for siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles, etc.? Was there any, and how did they all react?
So my son had I tried to take him to therapy during treatment, and he refused to speak to the therapist. it really impacted him in ways that I'm not sure he recognizes as a now 20-year-old. I I recognize it, and so I try to work with him and talk with him through it. Hope maybe one day he'll recognize that maybe he needs professional assistance, but we thankfully I've really made it a point to be there for him and to help him through and cope. Um, my husband has not felt the need um, to go further, and I'm embarrassed to say I've never asked the aunts and uncles and grandparents what supports they would need. Um, I, I am remiss that I didn't do that and that I was so focused on myself, my daughter, and my husband and my son. And so that was what I had capacity for. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question for all of you.
Thanks, Joy. We have a question from a psychologist working specifically in the oncology space. Um, they mentioned that they're sorry to hear that your daughter had such a challenging time connecting with a psychologist, and she's really glad that you persisted. In reflecting on the connection that she was finally able to make, do you have any tips on what was different with the psychologist that she connected with?
Okay, so first I want to be clear who she's finally working with is not a psychologist. I've gone rogue. It's in the complementary medicine space. She's working with someone who is a specialist in polyvagal therapy, or at least safe and sound protocol, and who is also a specialist in emotional freedom technique, and it's found in the US. And because there was just nothing for her here. Um, what has helped her was the fact that they really connected. The person didn't fully share the details, but the person that she's with has a trauma background themselves. And whereas Talia is 100% the focus, she doesn't feel that she is alone. Whereas all the other therapists, there was this disconnect and this not understanding how trauma really impacts you. And just the fact that the person understands trauma from a first person perspective, even though it's a vastly different trauma, really helped her connect in a way that no one else was able to do. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to connect with survivors or patients unless you yourself have gone through trauma. It's just that person has a very deep knowledge of what trauma does to the nervous system, and also how to start healing the trauma from a nervous system perspective, because she can't talk about it. And at 18, she now forgets a lot of it. But there are things where she reacts. And so she would have, in her January surgery, every night she had massive panic attacks for 2 hours. I would sit with her in the middle of the night in the hospital room, get into bed with her, and help her process the panic attack that she was having, and she didn't understand where it was coming from. And unless you know what's happening to the nervous system and polyvagal theory and just IFS and all of uh, the the trauma work in the somatic space and Gabor Mate and all of that, that's a rogue, like, these people are still considered heretics in a lot of psychological spaces, and this is where she found comfort. So I don't know if that helps, but I do recognize that I've gone rogue, and a lot of people would not necessarily agree with my path, but it's helped her.
Thanks for sharing again. Okay, so advocacy isn't only then for the child receiving treatment, but for others impacted as well. Any advice to leaders and policymakers as to what we can do as a system?
Listen, learn how to actively listen. Therapists are taught how to actively listen, and if every single human on this planet learned that skill, we would be a healthier planet full of love and not hate. And I think when you learn to listen and to not turn yourself off, I remember when I was in human resources, I felt like I had to keep this armor and not feel for the people who were coming to see me. And I almost feel that armor when I speak to doctors or when I speak to politicians. It's because they can't get too close. You're worried about burning out. You're worried about having too much compassion, empathy, and taking it all on. But what we're starting to learn through psychology is that when we actually process our emotions and we work through them and we acknowledge our emotions and label them, but particularly process them, that we can avoid burnout and that we can be empathetic for the people that we're sitting in across from. And I think that that's missing in many cases. And I think one of the reasons that I get on so well with her thoracic surgeon is that he really knows how to listen and he really knows how to be empathetic. And we've connected on another level, and I consider him a friend. I consider he's just someone I could speak to and turn to for advice in that, like, for her care. And there's very few who do that. And I think they're doing it in a way to protect themselves, but it's also impacting the relationship. I hope that answered the question.
I think that's very wise on many levels. And I apologize. We do have a couple more questions in the queue, but we are running out of time. So we will share these questions with Joy, and we will get those answered to those whose questions weren't answered. I do want to turn it over now to Dawn, who has some closing remarks for us. Dawn Pickering, who I think many of you know is part of our theme 5 education and training theme and PWLE extraordinaire. Over to you, Dawn.
Thanks so much, Helen, and a huge thanks to Joy for an amazing talk, which I'll say another thing or two about in a moment. But I am Dawn Pickering, and I am very proud to be co-lead for ACCESS Theme 5 Education and Training, and was sad to see that Joy was moving on to another great opportunity for herself, but grateful to be able to be here continuing the good work that she started with ACCESS, and we're really grateful that she's able to come back and do this with us. I'm also a fellow person with lived experience and cancer parent like Joy. I think, one of the things that's really important is that, Joy talked about advocacy and how she not only advocated and learned advocacy for her child first, and then went on to do public advocacy. And that's exactly, sort of the space that we talk about here at ACCESS. And to that end, obviously super important topic, amazing that Joy spends this time with us still and shares Talia's story with us. And thanks to Talia for allowing you to share that story with us as well. I would say Childhood Cancer Awareness Month ends tomorrow, but our advocacy does not. And so, it is something that we continue to do all year round. And here are 3 ways that you can take action today or in the coming days to continue this advocacy. One is by raising awareness. And Joy mentioned already the Stronger Than Cancer website, that's strongerthancancer.ca. That has been created and has a wealth of advocacy materials that can help you to get started on your public advocacy journey, or also just to use in your own context if your child is still in treatment and you need to advocate, as Joy did so effectively for her own child and her best needs. You can contact your member of parliament. Use the letter templates and advocacy guidelines that are in Stronger Than Cancer to reach out to your MP. And as Joy already explained, a few minutes of your time can influence decisions that affect countless children and families. And it is what got us the money to be able to create what became ACCESS in the first place. And we want to continue doing this across the country with our partners. to continue this great work that we do nationally. And lastly, learn more about Access at accessforkidscancer.ca. We are working to break down barriers so kids and families get the support and treatments that they need. We are working together nationally. This is really a novel, innovative way of doing things. We don't see it in any other country in the world, and we want to continue doing this together. So lastly, we're always looking to improve the Access Presents experience, and we'd really appreciate it if you would take 2 minutes. I know you're running out to your next meetings to fill out a quick survey. Just open the link. You can always go back to it later, but please do that so that we can get your suggestions for future topics and see how we did today. So you can use the link in the chat or scan the QR code on the screen to access that survey. And thank you everyone for joining us and listening to Joy's incredible story.